I want to introduce you all to somebody that you guys know. This is the part of the night where we raise money for a nonprofit that we've picked out. And the nonprofit you're going to hear more about is going to be from Kalpana Peddibhotla. So Kalpana, as you guys all know, is a life member. She's the one that created the immigration drives at a nationwide level, what they just saw, with the national organization. They did it in about 35 different cities, all on one day, and that's something that we've strived to keep alive here in SABA, Northern California. She's going to be looking to essentially create now the South Asian version of the NAACP. So please, put your hands together for Kalpana Peddibhotla. She tells you a little bit more about it.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. It's great to see a lot of familiar faces out here, and some new ones. So thanks so much for giving me an opportunity to present the South Asian Legal Impact Initiative. This is a joint collaboration between the SABA Foundation and the Asian American Legal Defense Fund. I want to start, though, by taking you on a personal journey with me. My family first came to the United States in the 1950s. My uncle actually arrived by ship. My father would come later in 1963. As far as our family stories, they may resonate with some of you. And I hope they might exemplify why we need this initiative. In the 1960s, my father was a graduate student at UCLA. He attended a free speech rally at the time. And upon his return, he was then threatened with deportation for doing so. In the 1970s, I would be barred from joining the Girl Scouts, and I would not be allowed in the homes of some of my white classmates. In the 80s, when my family moved to a small Texas town, they would have a meeting to discuss the fact that there were too many Indians in our town. There were at most 3 families. In the 80s and 90s, my family would be racially profiled as we drove across the South. And my mother, on her way home in her affluent Kentucky neighborhood, would be stopped by a police officer, escorted to her home to prove that she lived in that neighborhood. Around the time I was ostracized as a child in the 1970s, my older cousin would be brutally beaten. His head was kicked in by a mob of men as they yelled racial epithets at him. And thankfully, he survived that. In the 2000s, my young children would experience hate for the first time in our neighborhood when a man yelled at our family and asked us to go home. And then just in the last decade, my older brother, a family man of 4, an entrepreneur employing over 1,000 people, would be arrested for driving while brown back in that Texas town where we were from. It was so egregious that even a Texas judge would acknowledge it and later apologize to my brother. Now, I've shared these stories not to shock you or generate pity for me, but to reflect on the fact that these stories are not mine alone. These are the stories of our communities. And while our country has made important strides forward since my family came here over 60 years ago, South Asians still face immigration challenges, discrimination, and hate. And today, those challenges now come in suppressing our vote. Our proposal today is a joint initiative with the Asian American Legal Defense Fund. We are seeking to fund a legal fellow who will work under the direction of AALDEF for 2 years, starting this fall. Our initiative will promote the civil rights of our communities through impact litigation, know your rights forums, and pro bono network. I hope you will join me in that network. But our ultimate vision is to establish our own legal defense and education fund. As Rab described, just like the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, just like the Mexican American Legal Defense Fund, and yes, just like the Asian American Legal Defense Fund. And while we have benefited immensely from these organizations, we have an opportunity to learn from them, collaborate with them, and build a dedicated organizations for South Asian communities in the U.S. Why this initiative? Our communities are diverse with culturally specific needs, and they often look to us, the South Asian legal community. I remember actually being on the board of SABA-NC when 9/11 happened. At that time, we held a town hall. Hundreds of people showed up to that town hall. And they asked what we would do, what we, the legal community, would do. And we stepped up. And later, SABA North America was born. In 2017, when the idea for this project was initiated, it was in the aftermath of the hateful murder of a software engineer in Kansas of Indian descent. Our communities once again asked what we would do for them. I posit that we are overdue for an initiative like this to meet the unique needs of our communities. And though when AALDEF was born, there were only 1.5 Asian Americans in total in the United States. We are now at almost 5.5 million South Asians alone. And while we may be one of the most affluent communities, 10% of us live at the poverty level, and over 500,000 of us are undocumented. South Asians in the U.S., we've done a lot in this country. We have built religious institutions, cultural organizations, community centers, and professional associations like ours. So I began by telling you a little bit about the negative experiences that my family faced. These institutions uplifted us, and they gave us shelter away from some of the dark side of this beautiful country. But sometimes we need more than shelter. We need a sword. We cannot always stop hate from happening, but perhaps when my cousin was brutally beaten, if a South Asian Civil Rights Initiative had existed, his perpetrators could have been brought to justice. Or when my brother was arrested, his case could have been investigated. Or when my father was threatened with deportation, he would have had recourse to continue to exercise his free speech rights. Or when I was discriminated against as a child, my family would have known what their rights were. By having our own sword in the fight, we create capacity for pursuing justice for these incidents. We also create awareness within our community about our rights, and we overcome institutional barriers by letting those that discriminate against us know that we are willing to fight for our rights. So we attorneys, we have an opportunity to create our own community asset in laying the foundation for a secular legal defense and education fund. We are at the infancy of this project, so I do not have measurable goals to show you, but every building begins with a single brick, and this is that brick. This is our first public event where we are asking a SABA chapter to support this initiative. The money you donate today will help fund this legal fellowship. This allows us to increase our capacity to support more of our communities right now. The money you donate today will put us on a path towards shielding our children from the hardships we faced, my family and yours, and give them tools to fight against discrimination, immigration challenges, and hate. The money you donate today will pave the way for establishing a legacy for future generations through the Legal Defense Fund. I invite you to join me. Thank you.